all so much for coming today to this riveting workshop about the incorporation process for cooperative businesses in Arizona. We're so excited to have you all here together in person and online. What a cool world we live in. We are going to start this off with a land acknowledgement. So I will pass it to Cassandra to go ahead and do that.
Okay, so as Hannah mentioned, we would like to begin today's workshop with a land acknowledgement. So we are currently on the unceded traditional and contemporary lands of the Aquinnah, the Hokum, and the Tohono peoples. As many of us here today are descendants of settlers, immigrants, or descendants of those forcibly brought to this continent, it is important that we all commit to learning and unlearning the violent and colonized history of this land. We must properly honor the indigenous peoples, elders, and knowledge keepers, past, present, and future, whose stewardship and love of these lands and all its beings allow us to be here today. It's especially important for those of us here today as continual learners and actors in the local food economy to recognize the importance of uplifting and supporting Black and Indigenous voices. As we aim to build a stronger and more just community in what we now call Phoenix, we must center Indigenous voices, epistemologies, and practices which often speak of connection and reciprocity as opposed to traditional Western narratives of extraction, competition, and dominance. While acknowledgement means little unless coupled with meaningful action, we must all recognize our full, true history before we can move forward and must educate ourselves on our responsibilities to one another and the land. Much of what we discuss when talking about sustainability and food is rooted in the traditional practices and local knowledge of Indigenous peoples around the world. It is our responsibility to acknowledge our complex history and privileges in this space in order to empower diverse perspectives and practices that will best serve our shared future. Thank you.
Thank you, Cassandra. Okay, so we will jump into it. Here's a brief overview of our workshop here today. I'll start with an introduction, just giving a little bit of background about why we're here. I'll talk a little bit about the cooperative business model. Then I will pass it to our friends at the ACC who will go through and give you a more in-depth version of what is needed to actually incorporate based on the state's guidelines. We have some Q&As for them. Afterwards, Huda will take us through the foundational documents, the articles of incorporation and bylaw documents. And then we'll hear from two panelists, cooperative entrepreneurs here in Arizona, and you will all have an opportunity to ask them questions as well. So if you are on the chat, please know that we are monitoring that, and we would love to hear your insights as well. Let's start with a little bit about Thrive. Thrive is a women-owned and operated Arizona benefit corporation. We started in 2020 as we witnessed and experienced so much uncertainty. We knew that we wanted to be a part of the solution and to create opportunities to build forward rather than back. We aim to support entrepreneurs and businesses that want to create a positive impact on communities with care for the environment while still being economically successful. We are especially interested in working to activate and empower the use of more sustainable and equity-oriented business models, such as the cooperative model. Some of the ways that we try to build forward, we have our Sustainable Cooperative Food Business Training Program. We just ended our summer cohort. It will launch again in spring. I know that a few of our cooperative entrepreneurs will be joining us today, online and in person, so a special hello to you. We also do client-specific consultations and programming to meet their exact needs, provide support and knowledge sharing. And then we do what we're here today to do. We work with these workshops to really try to build out the alternative business model ecosystem so that these values-based businesses have an opportunity to thrive. Today, we're focusing on the processes and regulation part of this matrix. In order to build strong, sustainable local economies, these 4 key support elements are required. Right now, there's tons of support services for traditional business models. However, there are very few support services available for alternative business models, namely cooperative businesses especially in the state of Arizona. Today, we're going to be focusing on policies and regulations element. Formal and accessible policies, procedures, and regulations are key to the success of a business's capacity to, one, first exist, and then two, to thrive. Okay. Again, our workshop objectives are, we're really hoping that everybody walks away with a basic understanding of the cooperative business model and features, understanding of the key factors and requirements for cooperative business incorporation in Arizona, understanding the key decision-making points for cooperative entrepreneurs when they need to consider, what they need to consider when incorporating. And then finally, we hope that everybody will join us in learning from Arizona's trailblazing cooperative entrepreneurs about how and why they incorporated under this model. So I'll give a brief overview here of cooperative business. Cooperatives are values-driven businesses that put workers and community benefits at the forefront of what they do. In contrast to conventional companies, workers and/or members of the cooperative participate in profits, oversight, and management of the business using democratic practices. Cooperative businesses are owned and controlled by the people who use or produce their services. The unique structure and principles of cooperative businesses have been proven to build social trust and social capital, key factors for resilience in times of economic crisis. Social trust is built in cooperative business through horizontal versus the traditional hierarchical or vertical governance. Embedded in the cooperative business model is the commitment to worker well-being and community well-being beyond immediate economic gains. These values create long-term economic and social relationships that are really robust. Cooperative businesses foster member participation, creativity, and network building. Member owners have a financial stake in the business, a voice in the decision-making process, and control over how their work is organized, performed, and managed. Since decisions are made collectively, they are informed by diverse perspectives and thus collectively reflect the needs of the businesses and the communities that they serve. These characteristics contribute not only to the non-monetary value of member owners' work, but also to the social capital of the communities that they serve. And although each cooperative business is unique as it's built and informed by the unique members and their values, each cooperative is similar in that it has to follow the 7 cooperative principles. The 7 standard principles were created by the International Cooperative Alliance, and they are designed to help organizations flourish and operate successfully while encouraging all members to participate equally. You can see on this slide that there's a few features in the cooperative principles that really embed care for community and environment. Cooperatives promote cooperation rather than competition around their co-cooperatives. They provide education and training, information sharing internally and externally, and they all operate with democratic member control. The primary difference between cooperatives versus kind of traditional businesses are that cooperatives exist by and for the membership. Each member also only has, or we all have equal votes in cooperative. It's one member, one vote, one voice, essentially. Whereas in traditional business, the amount of say is traditionally based on shareholders and majority shareholders. And traditional business exists to maximize profits, kind of no matter what the cost, whereas cooperative businesses are here and operate to maximize people. That doesn't mean that they don't make profit, it just means that they put their membership and their community before profit maximization. Okay, so the term cooperative can refer to both specific types of businesses recognized under the law and/or to internal governance structures of an organization. As a legal entity, a cooperative is a business that has been legally incorporated as a cooperative. Here, it's important to remember that there are several types of cooperative businesses, some being the producer, consumer, even housing cooperatives, finance cooperatives, worker cooperatives, purchasing, and multi-stakeholder. This workshop and most of the work Drive does is primarily interested in this worker cooperative business model. And although we are focusing on cooperatives as a legal entity today, it's important to note that businesses can still use the cooperative structure to guide its operations. As a legal structure versus entity, a cooperative is a business that operates as a co-op, but is not legally incorporated as one. They could be a nonprofit, an LLC, benefit corporation, or so forth. It's a little bit of a less formal structures and practices. Here are some examples of those. Okay, and then we have some examples of cooperatives in Arizona. We have two of these groups here with us today, the Food Forest Co-op, a worker-owned cooperative. We have the Phoenix Food Co-op, which is a multi-stakeholder, meaning that it is a consumer and worker-owned cooperative. And then we have Sun Produce, which is one of the cooperative practices that I spoke about. They are not legally incorporated with the cooperative model, rather they are a nonprofit, but through their bylaws and membership, they act as, operate as a cooperative, producer cooperative. Okay, today we are here because the state of Arizona has cooperative business legislation, allowing for cooperatives to be legitimate legal business entities, just like LLCs or traditional corporations. The statute was updated in 2014 and later revised in 2016 to allow for the expanded incorporation of cooperatives in the state. Despite this history, cooperatives remain a largely untapped area of business development. We've been able to identify 31 businesses in Arizona that operate as co-ops, as well as a growing number of businesses and entrepreneurs seeking to form under or transition to this model. So far, only two businesses, Phoenix Food Coop and Phoenix Food Forest, have leveraged the state's updated cooperative legislation to legally incorporate as a cooperative association in Arizona. So we are here to help make this process a little easier. We give some guiding how we can activate this model more frequently and easily. So we are joined here today with the ACC, the Arizona Corporation Commission, who will take you all through the process, the incorporation process from their lens. I will introduce Joey Ordonez, who is the Assistant Director. Joey received his undergraduate degree from the University of Arizona and his MBA from Western Governors University. Prior to joining the corporation's division, Joey served as the Assistant Director for the Arizona Board of Behavioral Health Examiners. Joey has an extensive experience with state agencies, boards, and commissions. Thank you very much for being here today, Joey. And with that, I will pass it to you.
Thank you so much, Hannah. Thank you all for the opportunity to be here. I was supposed to be present with our division director, but she recently turned ill. She was also looking really excited, or feeling really excited to present to you all. So I'll do the presentation on behalf of both of us. What I'm hoping to do is just provide a bit of context in terms of who we are as the Arizona Corporation Commission, in particular the corporations division. I'm hoping to provide some useful information and serve as a point of contact moving forward. With that said, I do want to just say congratulations to everyone in this meeting. Either you're in a business, you're thinking about becoming part of a business, you're interested in the cooperative model, and that's really exciting news. And I think in the end, what you'll find is that our division plays a very small role in terms of all that you do. Technically, we see ourselves as a ministerial filing agency where we're required to review minimum statutory requirements for your filing needs. And in a sense, we serve as a repository, and that's kind of where we fit in. And so before I get talking about the cooperative marketing associations in particular, I did want to provide a few slides just to go over the Arizona Corporation Commission, our division in particular, just to help explain who we are, what we do, and again, provide a little bit more context of how and where we fit in with your business endeavors. So as I mentioned, Tanya Gibson is our division director. I'm the assistant director. I've been here for about 2 years. And I'll tell you that 2 years really feels like 10 years. There's so much to be absorbed through our corporation commission. There are so many statutes involving LLCs and corporations, for-profit, nonprofit. Today we'll be talking about cooperative marketing associations, and there's just so many filing needs. And so I say that because in the future, if you find yourself having a question, how do I form this? What form do I file in order to accomplish this? Feel free to reach out to us. You know, we understand that there's a lot of red tape that's involved. The process to meet your filing needs and can sometimes be burdensome. And so we're here to help. We want to help facilitate that and make it as easy as we possibly can. With that said, we do have an online system, which we refer to as eCorp. eCorp can meet a lot of your filing needs. However, it doesn't meet all of the needs. And therefore, we do have paper filings that we can get to. Hannah, if you want to go to the next slide, please. So in terms of the Arizona Corporation Commission, the Corporations Division is one of 8 divisions that we have here. And as its name implies, Corporations Division, that's largely what we deal with, LLCs and corporations. Drilling down on that a bit further, our organizational chart, we have a division director, Tanya Gibson, myself as the assistant director. We have several administrative specialists that help us facilitate accounting needs or IT needs or HR needs. Beyond that, we have section supervisors, and we have 6 different sections, which I'll speak to in a minute. Overall, we have about 50 staff members that encompass all of our different sections, and we do have an office in Tucson for the convenience of the southern part of Arizona. With respect to our sections, I'll just briefly go over. We have initial processing, and largely what they do is they receive mailed documents, fax documents, and they effectively do data entry. They enter in the information that you provide on your forms. We have an examination section, and as their name implies, they examine that document. I will say that when they're examining documents, they're looking for the minimum requirements. As long as a form has the minimum requirements pursuant to statute, that form will be approved. The form can certainly have more than the minimum, and a lot of times they do. But again, we're looking at it from the perspective, does this form meet the minimum statutory requirements? We also have a same day, next day team. And as its name implies, that just means that they can provide a highly accelerated processing time. Sometimes people need to get their documents filed very urgently. Let's say there's a business closing that's on the line. We have a team that can process documents the same day, within 2 hours even, as well as the next day. We also have a records section. Our records section maintains records that go all the way back to the early 1900s. If a person was interested in getting some of these archived records, they would submit a records request to obtain those. Our records section also deals with certificates of good standing or providing certified copies. And if you find yourself ever needing that for your business endeavors, our records section can provide that. We have a customer contact center. In other words, that's our front desk or our reception area where they receive customers who come into our offices in person. And then we have a call center. And I'll just spend a few moments talking about our call center because I think it's important. As I indicated, there's a lot of red tape that's involved, and a lot of customers have questions on, how do I form this? What form do I need to accomplish this? We have a call center. They're available Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. They do receive about 550 calls per day. And again, I wanted to mention that just to kind of illustrate how many consumers are out there in the state of Arizona, how many people have questions. So if you find yourself ever in need of help or having a question, you are like so many others, and we're here to help. And at the end of our slideshow, I do have our call center phone number as well as a general email address that I encourage you all to take down. And if you have questions down the road, please feel free to reach out. A little bit more about our division. So to put it in context, we have about 578,000 active corporations. That does include for-profit corporations as well as nonprofit corporations. LLCs, we have just over 1.3 million active LLCs. Online versus paper filings, as I indicated, we do have a system which we call eCorp, and that's what manages online filings. Most people do elect to use eCorp. 84% of our customers file their business needs online, which we highly recommend. We do acknowledge that eCorp doesn't provide for everything. In particular, it does not provide for cooperative marketing associations. So therefore, there's still a population that does file by paper. That's at 16%. Total filings received. So those 6 sections that I just mentioned, overall, they processed 505,000 filings over the last fiscal year, and that's typical. Just about that number is what we see every year. Average days to process expedited filings, about 1 to 5, and average day to process regular filings, about 14 to 16. A little bit more information on our call center. We receive about 138,000 calls per year. We try to answer as much as we can between the hours of 8 and 5. And on average, we find that customers usually wait about 6 minutes. Okay, and so now we'll shift gears and talk about the cooperative marketing associations. And again, from our perspective, what I would want to relay is I want to go over what the minimum statutory requirements are and talk about how we can help facilitate your filing needs. And beyond that, if you have any questions, there will be an opportunity at the end where hopefully I can answer any questions that you might have. Some general information about the cooperative marketing associations. So there are 3 types. We have cooperative marketing associations, electric cooperative nonprofit membership corporations, nonprofit electric generation and transmission cooperative. For the purpose of our meeting today, we'll specifically be talking about cooperative marketing associations. And these are the only type of cooperative associations that can be for-profit. Some more general information, and this is just with respect to corporations in general. If you are for-profit, one of the requirements is that you need to file an annual report, and our statutes provide for what needs to be in that annual report. That annual report includes the number of authorized shares. When filing your corporation, a certificate of disclosure must be on file. And typically a certificate of disclosure, it's a document where you're disclosing if the business has any bankruptcy, for instance, in the past, if any of its directors, officers, members have any criminal history in their past. And again, it's just disclosing that information. Must have at least 1 director. And with respect to nonprofits, they are not required to file annual reports. A few more points, and specifically some of the limitations that we have with eCorp, our online system. Every corporation is required to have an identifier. Even a cooperative is required to have an identifier. And what an identifier is, at the end of the business name, you're identifying what kind of a business it is. So for instance, if you're starting an LLC, that LLC needs to be at the end of the business name. If you're starting a corporation, that identifier needs to be at the end of the business name. And you can spell out the word of the identifier. You can use acronyms such as LLC or Inc., but that's what we refer to as an identifier. That is a requirement. Cooperatives can have members, and cooperatives in particular are unique in the sense where they are a corporation that can have members. And I say that because typically LLCs are the ones that have members, whereas corporations have officers and directors. However, the Cooperative Marketing Association does have members. And currently, if you desire to form a cooperative marketing association with us, you would have to do it on paper, and that is only because eCorp doesn't allow for it. We don't have that function built into our system. And when you file on paper, you're welcome to use your own documentation, as long as that documentation meets the minimum statutory requirements. Or you could use one of our forms. You could use our corporation form and then just indicate that you are a cooperative marketing association. And if you do elect to use our form does have the minimum statutory requirements. So as long as that information is present, it would be approved. Some more requirements about the Cooperative Marketing Association. Must be a corporation. Stock is optional. If you do elect stock, you can refer to stock as common or preferred, whereas common stock, there is voting, dividends do change. And if you elect preferred stock, there's no voting and the dividends are set. 5 or more persons engaged in the production of products or services. 5 or more small businesses, individuals, or entities engaged in marketing and distribution of manufactured goods for import or export, they can make profit. And I'll just spend a moment there because with a cooperative marketing association, you may or may not make profit. You can essentially be a for-profit or a nonprofit. With respect to the articles of incorporation, so here are just some bullet points, and these come straight out of our statute. So these are some of the minimum requirements. The name of your cooperative marketing association needs to be present along with that identifier. The purpose, setting forth the purpose of your business. The principal address, and what does principal mean? It basically means where is the place where business will be transacted. The term, how long will this business be operational? At least 5 directors must be present. You need to indicate whether it will be for-profit or nonprofit. If it's for-profit and it will have capital stock, then you need to indicate the number of shares. And amendments, so if you make any amendments, any changes, amendments always need to be filed immediately with our division. The board of directors. The Cooperative Marketing Association shall have 1 president, 1 or more vice presidents, secretary and treasurer can be combined. This is what we refer to as the officers, technically. An annual report. Annual reports do need to come in, and there is a specific deadline each year that is provided, and it's exactly 1 year from when you originated or incorporated. That annual report would be due. And restructuring, like most businesses, you are able to restructure your business down the road if you elect to. And a few more details with respect to cooperative marketing associations. Cooperative marketing associations may be engaged in many activities. And I thought this was important to highlight because some people they have the misperception when they see the term marketing that they might question, do I need to be in the practice or the business of marketing? And the short answer is no. As we see here, Cooperative Marketing Association may provide for manufacturing, marketing, harvesting, storing, handling, or utilization of products and services, as well as several others. And I thought that was important to highlight. And bylaws. So bylaws are required for your Cooperative Marketing Association. However, you are not required to file your bylaws with our division. In fact, if you provided your bylaws to us, we wouldn't accept them because per statute, it's not something that we require as a division. However, it is something that is required for you to have in terms of your own records. Each association shall adopt its bylaws and maintain those through your own records. Although the association is required to adopt bylaws, those bylaws are not recorded by our division. And so again, I'll mention a comment that I started out with, that I hope what you'll find is that we play virtually a pretty small role in all that you do. We are here as a ministerial filing agency. We're looking for minimum statutory requirements with respect to your filing needs. And however we can help, we'd love to help however we can, whether it's providing forms, providing feedback, We can give legal advice, of course, but usually we can set people in the right direction in terms of what kind of business filing they're trying to accomplish.
Thank you so much, Joey, for helping put that down. And just so everyone knows, we will be providing this PowerPoint and the recording of this after the workshop is over. So you can all review all of these steps and everything that's Joey talked about. Do we have any questions for Joey about the state's requirements for incorporation? Online or in person? Looks like you did a really good job of explaining it.
Yeah, great.
Any online? No? Okay, well, thank you so much. And I think the next slide is for your contact information. Yes, so Joey and Tanya have been so helpful to our team and so responsive. So I really do encourage you to take them up on reaching out if you have any specific questions. Again, there are limitations via eCorp. And so if you have direct questions, they are great resources to connect with.
Thank you so much, Hannah.
Okay, thank you. And with that, we will pass it to Huda, who will, sorry, who will start. Thanks, Joey.
Thank you.
Okay, and with that, we'll pass it to Huda to walk through kind of the key elements of both of these documents, the articles and the bylaws, and key decision points that need to be considered.
Hello, everyone. I'm Huda, and thank you for being with us today. As Hannah mentioned earlier, this is not the most riveting conversation, but we'll try to keep it as engaging as possible. So if anyone has any questions while I'm speaking, feel free to raise your hand, and we can talk through everything. So today, I really want to speak to you all about two foundational documents for legal corporate incorporation. Those are the articles of incorporation and the bylaws. And these are going to be very important if you are seriously considering owning your own cooperative, starting your own cooperative, or even if you've already started a cooperative with others. I found for ourselves this is very good to brush up on and to understand in depth, because these are in some ways living documents. So it's always good to stay in tune with these. So first we'll begin with a high-level overview of the incorporation process. All right. So the business incorporation guidelines specific to the state include the following general steps. We're gonna move in on the next slide on cooperative specific guidelines. But these slides have been designed to be a public resource moving forward. So you can see a relative amount of information on the slides that are going to be included. The first step involved here is to select a business name that hasn't been chosen before and that can easily be determined by a quick search on the ACC website. The next step is to select the business entity type and to submit the articles of incorporation. In this case, we're interested in the cooperative corporation type. And we'll go into the articles of incorporation shortly. And the following two steps are not the focus of the program, but they are included in here for your reference. So you may need to complete a transaction tax privilege application with the Arizona Department of Revenue, and you'll need to check with the IRS to obtain an employer identification number or a tax identification number, which is basically a number that's used to identify the business. All right, so the cooperative incorporation process. So you'll notice that cooperative incorporation guidelines across the nation more or less involve these general steps, and you'll note that some of these overlap with the state incorporation guidelines, but some do differ. So in your business name selection, it's not a state requirement, but you can consider adding the terms cooperative to indicate that the business is a cooperative, and incorporated or INC to indicate that it's a corporation. In Arizona, there's a minimum of 5 member owners required in the state to start in order to be able to incorporate as a cooperative. And sometimes businesses will internally operate by the cooperative principles without having the legal distinction for a multitude of reasons, including this one. As a team, you'll need to decide on the presence and number of membership shares. This and much more will need to be delineated and voted on democratically in the preparation of your cooperative bylaws, which we'll go into more detail on shortly. It's also recommended to prepare a membership agreement for prospective members upon joining the team. And last, but surely not least, is the joint preparation of the articles of incorporation that are to be filed with the ACC. You'll note that while the articles need to be filed, the bylaws do not, but they are required by the state to have. All right, so now let's take a deeper look. The articles of incorporation and the bylaws are the incorporating documents that outline the co-op's ownership and foundational procedures. All cooperatives are tied to the same binding structure and framework. And while the articles must be filed and reviewed by the state or the ACC, as we just mentioned previously, the bylaws are legally required for a cooperative to have, but they're not reviewed by or turned into any state entity. So once submitted to the ACC, the Articles of Incorporation establishes the cooperative as an entity in the eyes of the state. Directors and managers from that point onwards are then liable for misalignment with these articles. And if it's wished to amend the articles, the amendment involves submitting additional documents to the state or the ACC. So the articles of incorporation are generally shorter documents than bylaws are. They can be around 2 pages long, and they include the following short sections. We'll see an example of what this looks like soon. So they include the name of the co-op, the primary business address, and this is recommended to be a long-lasting address to avoid the need for frequent amendments. And also based on legal advice, it's recommended for this to be a physical address rather than a PO box. The purpose of the co-op, how long the co-op is forecasted to be open and operational, and often this is just set as perpetual. The directors, their responsibilities and their terms. In a worker co-op starting off with a few members, the directors, the term directors are often used to refer to the founding member owners. The difference in name here in this situation is referring then to a role distinction more than anything else. And we'll speak more about this, how this can be different later on. In Arizona, it's required that each board has 1 president, at least 1 vice president, a treasurer, and a secretary. The names, addresses, and signatures of the incorporators, names and addresses, or the name and address of the statutory agent. If you're curious to know what that is or what an incorporator is, stay tuned for the next slide. State whether the co-op is for-profit or non-profit, and at Thrive, we currently focus on for-profit cooperative business incubation. And if the co-op is for-profit and you decide to issue stock, the number of shares available will need to be stated in this document. If you're curious about what that means, stay tuned for more. We focused on the articles of incorporation here in this slide, but when turning in your documentation to the ACC, just note that you may need to fill out and turn in some accompanying forms, such as a certificate of disclosure, and you can obtain this form from the ACC. So with a raise of hands, how many people feel fully comfortable with the terminology and definitions used on this slide? Yeah, that's awesome. Wow. We have someone in the room. We're going to be learning from them later on. Okay, so since that's the case, we prepared a few key terms for you all. Let's review them together before going into more of the detailed requirements. So we created a nifty little term sheet for y'all to cover the key terms related to the articles and bylaws. That's a little bit more extensive than what you see here, and those along with these slides will be provided to everyone after the program for reference. So on the previous slide, we spoke about the need for identifying an incorporator and also a statutory agent on the Articles of Incorporation. A statutory agent is basically the state's official contact for all of the business, legal documents, and official communications. This can be either one of the member owners or a third-party agent. And one of the reasons why a third-party agent is opted for sometimes is to avert the need for amendment and updating procedures every time there's a change in the member owners. An incorporator is often a member owner and is the one that's responsible for turning in the incorporation documentation to the ACC. That can be anyone or everyone on the board, depending on the size of the group. And when it comes to stock and your board's decision to issue stock, that's basically the capital of the business or a share of the business that gives business shareholders certain rights. So two types or classes of stock in a worker-owned cooperative include common stock and preferred stock. So real quick, I have a visual that can help explain this a little more. So common stock refers to the member shares. That's basically when someone becomes a member owner is what they hold once they buy into the company. And this type of stock entitles the person to voting rights. So it's one member, one vote, one share. And then preferred stock. So these are shares that are sellable to the public in order to raise capital, but they do not come along with voting rights. And they come only with a potential for dividends once those are distributed at the end of the year. Okay. So here's an example of what we are referring to. That have been generously shared by the Food Forest Cooperative. And as you can see here, the Article 1 starts off with the name of the co-op. We see that the duration is perpetual and the principal place of business is included. If there's no physical location for the business, or there is going to be one in the future, but not currently, this can sometimes be set as a residential address. So any questions up until now before we dive into the key decision-making points? Okay. So when hypothetically meeting as a team to put together the Articles of Incorporation, these are the key points that you might want to collectively vote and decide on. There are probably more, but here are just a few to consider. So what is the name of the cooperative? Where will be the main place of business? Who will be your statutory agent? We talked a bit about these three questions and how to go about determining them. Our next one is, what is the number of directors that you would like to have on the board of directors, and who will be on the initial board of directors? So let's pause here for a moment. Earlier, we talked about the fact that in a worker-owned cooperative with a smaller group of worker owners, it's possible for the board of directors and the worker-owner team to be one and the same. This is often no longer the case when the worker-owner team grows to become much larger in the tens or hundreds. And when that happens, it's beneficial to have the board of directors serve as representatives for the larger pool of member owners. And note that this doesn't detract from each member owner's say in high-stake decisions, but it does simplify the day-to-day decision-making process. And finally, who will be your incorporators? All right, so now let's move on to the second foundational cooperative incorporation document that we'll be covering for today, which are bylaws. So after incorporation, the bylaws are usually adopted, and they provide a plan for how the cooperative should function, its internal operations, and its structure. They state how the cooperative will conduct its business, and they must be consistent with both the state statutes and the Articles of Incorporation. So bylaws typically include the following general articles. You'll notice in the example that we share that they are much longer and more extensive documents. And a single article is often divided into subsections for this reason. So you'll note that these documents, the articles, the sections can differ from co-op to co-op, but what we really aim to provide here is a general guideline of what to expect. But it's definitely not all encompassing. So bylaws often include the following articles. Article number 1 is organization. This article might cover general information such as the name of the co-op, its ownership, and its purpose. It might include the values of the co-op, and it should include the 7 cooperative principles and the co-op's commitment to them. Article number 2 is membership. And this might cover who's eligible for membership. And this should be in alignment with cooperative principle number 1, which is open and voluntary membership. So it should be non-discriminatory. It also covers the classes of membership. So co-ops might include different classes. In a worker-owned co-op, for example, there might be both worker owners and employees. And requirements for becoming a member after eligibility is determined. Voting rights. This section might also cover rules regarding termination of membership and then the return of initial membership fees where applicable, because we talked about buy-in earlier on. So article number 3 is with regards to meetings. This might cover details pertaining to the annual meeting. This is the meeting in which it's hoped that everyone is present and the high-stake decisions are often collectively made. So we talked earlier about how the board of directors and they might make more of the day-to-day decisions, but the annual meeting is where some of these more high-stake decisions are made. How to go about petitioning for a special meeting. How meeting notices will be shared out and made sure that everyone can access these. Rules regarding voting, such as absentee ballots, etc. The number and percentage of membership, which constitutes a quorum. So a quorum, does anyone know with a raise of hands what that means? Do you want to try and?
Okay, it's the minimum number of people you need to hold an official meeting. Like official business.
Yeah, and that's important, right? Because if not enough people join the meeting and then it's considered that a majority vote is present, that whatever that vote is, it being passed would not be fair to the whole group. That's very important. Thank you. Okay, so board of directors. This article might cover the number of qualifications of the board of directors. Generally, boards have odd numbers of directors for the ease of decision making when voting, especially if their voting structure is a majority vote. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. They might start off with a small number of directors and then shift to a system of proportional representation when the cooperative grows. And we mentioned that a bit earlier. And then this section can also go over the duties, the election process, the terms of directors, the removal of directors, details about board meetings, and a list of subcommittees if those are desired in the co-op. So article number 5, and we'll go over 8 just so you know, covers the officers of the board. And that it might include the duties of the officers. So we talked about how there's a minimum requirement in Arizona to have the 4 foundational officers, president, at least 1 vice president, a secretary, and a treasurer. So it'll cover their terms, the election process, which is annual, and more. So article number 6, member dividends and equity capital. This article might cover processes such as how proceeds for profit will be distributed, the setting up and management of reserves, which are basically savings accounts or liquid assets that are set aside to cover for unforeseen costs or losses. The allocation of losses, how the members will be equally responsible for the loss experienced by a co-op, and the payment upon termination of membership, the timeline by which this would be paid, and the amount. And then dividend and stock delineation, such as preferred stock that we talked a little bit about earlier, and more. So second to last that we'll talk about today is dissolution and liquidation. This article might cover how to manage assets in the case of dissolution, including where to pay them out and by what order of priority. So dissolution refers to the legal closing down of the business, and liquidation refers to the selling or distributing of cooperative's assets to any claimants as a result of dissolution. And finally, what we'll cover today is the amendments to the bylaws. So this is generally how, when, and by whom amendments are initiated and passed. And this might just be a very small section that you'll note in the bylaws. So here we have an example of one of the articles in our bylaws document covering the first article, organization. It's not the full article that you see here, it's much longer. But as you see here, it's broken down into the articles. So it's Article 1 and then subsections, point 1, point 2. And we'll include examples for you all to take a deeper look at on your own time. So when meeting as a team to put together and vote on your bylaws, these are a few of the key points that you might want to collectively vote and decide on. The first one being, what is the type of the cooperative that you choose to operate by? So here we focus largely on the worker-owned cooperative. But we'll hear later on from Ian, from Phoenix Food Coop, which is a multi-stakeholder cooperative. So you'll be able to hear a little bit about that. And then what are the classes of members in your co-op? If it's a worker cooperative, do you choose to have only worker owners or worker owners and employees? What is the candidacy period for onboarding member owners? That's essentially referring to the time span during which candidates' performance is observed, which is often around 6 months. What is the fiscal year of the cooperative? What is the desired voting structure? So that can be unanimous or majority. Unanimous being everyone agrees and then the vote passes. And in the latter case, what is the majority needs to be defined? So an example of this could be just 75% of the board needs to agree. And what will constitute a quorum at a worker owner meeting? And our friend here helped us define that earlier. Thank you. So you'll note that the majority number will look much different depending on the type and the size of the co-op. The larger the co-op gets, you might want to be more flexible so that at the end of the day, decisions can be made. And an example of a quorum is also 75%. Then you can see the final 3 questions here. Will all members be automatically elected to the board of directors? What will the officers of the cooperative be? What are their roles? And what are their terms? And finally, would you like to have committees? And if so, what would be their focal areas? So this is a tip that was shared by a cooperative lawyer team for when actually writing the articles and bylaws out. It's often best to frame minor decisions that are subject to frequent change as generally as possible when focusing, but when focusing on finalizing the more foundational cooperative decisions, that can be left to more decision-making capacity of the board and member owners. So this kind of eases the process of making changes. Otherwise, the annual meeting is when these changes can be requested and voted on. And to conclude, here is a general overview of the process submitting your articles of incorporation to the ACC. I'm walking you through. Once to finalize your articles and all related decisions are made as a team. It's highly recommended to work with an attorney for a legal review of the documents. After this, you can submit your articles to the ACC by either mailing them in or dropping them off in person. Currently, the E-Corp option is limited for the cooperative incorporation. And either the articles will be accepted or they'll be returned to the incorporators for edits. It is generally a $60 filing fee for regular processing and around $95 for expedited, just so you know what to expect. And here are some resources that we hope will support you in this process. We have some worker cooperative specific documents and multi-stakeholder co-ops example documents as well. Just want to take a minute to extend a warm thank you to the Food Forest Cooperative and the Phoenix Food Cooperative for their commitment to uplifting other players in the cooperative business economy and by sharing their knowledge and resources with everyone. And finally, we've put together a key terminology sheet for everyone to access after the session. This will just be covering the terms that have been discussed in the session, as well as some other terms that may be generally useful in the article and bylaws crafting process. Thank you for bearing with me in this kind of heavy conversation. Any final questions from anyone? Yeah.
Just a question on the dissolution topic. So with the cooperatives, if you have it as a nonprofit, in the general nonprofit law, the standard practice is that dissolution, we probably prefer to put this dissolving taxes to another 5,000 nonprofit. Is there any rules, requirements, limitations on distribution of cooperative and nonprofit cooperatives?
That is a great question. Hannah, do you have the answer to that?
So specifically talking about the dissolution of cooperatives and specifically about nonprofit cooperative associations. So I know that in the state of Arizona, you cannot be a 501c3 cooperative nonprofit. It's a C4. And I think that the dissolution is also part of the bylaws. So the organization still gets to make those decisions when crafting the bylaw, is what I would say. Since it's an article and they get to decide how to distribute assets afterwards, I would assume that that would be something written in there. Yeah, thank you for the question. Any other questions?
And if it's any more like in detail technical questions for like a legal team, we definitely have contacts that we work with legal teams, so we can forward any more detailed questions to them as well. Feel free to just reach out to us by email if that comes up later. We'll have our contact information. Any more questions for now? Online or in person? Okay. Awesome. All right, I'll pass it back to Hannah to introduce our panel of cooperative business owners. Something a little more exciting for you all this evening.
Yeah. I will invite my two guests up, Ian and Maria. If you don't mind, I'm giving them a little clap for welcome. Sorry, we're trying to figure out the camera so it can be engaging for you guys on Zoom as well. Okay, yeah, Maria's going to do a little stretch and then. Okay. So again, we are going to update this presentation and share it after this workshop, probably in about a week when we have the video ready and processed. And the Food Forest Co-op just gave us permission to share their articles and bylaws as well. So big thank you to both of these organizations for making their information available so that others can build off of the hard work that they've done as trailblazers in this space. Okay, you're welcome. Okay, so I did not get both of your bios, but these are two folks who I've had the pleasure of working with for quite some time. So excited to have you both here. Ian is one of the founding members of the Phoenix Food Coop, and Maria Pellicano is one of the founding members of the very recently incorporated Food Forest Cooperative. Yeah, it's a big feat. So I am going to pass it to them. So I have a couple of questions prepared, and then we're really going to open it up to all of you to get to learn from their experience. If there's any specific questions you want to know about how they got here, why they chose this. Sorry, I'm putting you both on the spot right now with that offer, but they're a wealth of information and a great resource. So can't wait for all of you to get to know them as well. So we'll start with just an introduction. Can you tell me a little bit about the cooperative you co-own and what kind of cooperative is it?
This one work? Good afternoon, everyone. Like it's been mentioned, my name is Maria Barracano with the Food Forest Cooperative. I am one of the 5 original incorporators of the team, and there's 2 others here. So I also want to put a shout out there to our team. We're small, but we're mighty, you know, we're doing a lot in the community. So we are based at Spaces of Opportunity, currently growing on 1 acre. The farthest west acre of the 19 acres that we have access to. But with that, we're also growing, we've planted easily over 200 trees, all fruit bearing, all with the focus to be able to harvest and help feed the community. So with that, we're currently growing on half of the acre right now, with hopes of the coming season to plant on the additional half. Another 200 to 300 trees as well. So in this process, we've been growing seasonal crops as well in the, building the ecosystem within the property, help heal the nutrients in the soil, then have your canopies, which are the larger trees, with hopes to then also include additional growing spaces up beneath that. Yeah, so there's a lot of, if you love growing, Alexis here is always out there in the dirt, and it's a healing experience as well. But it's great to reintroduce plants that were originally, at one point the area was cleared off for development. And so now it's beautiful to see that we're reintroducing a lot of the indigenous plants from this territory to be used for medicine, for food, and to heal the community.
Thanks so much, Maria. Thank you so much, Hannah. I just want to say, we were sitting here, I think 6 months ago exactly, and this exact same room, I think the exact same spot, exact same panel. It's great to hear the progress though, of the incorporation, growing trees. So congratulations to the Food Forest Cooperative, the second cooperative to incorporate in Arizona. So congratulations on that. A few quick thank yous to folks in the room. I think people we have talked to about how to incorporate, now that we're talking about how we did incorporate, it's really exciting. So of course, Thrive, Hannah, we've gone back and forth every step of the way, I feel like. And so thank you so much for doing this and then bringing people together, making it easier for everyone else to do this too. We have Vital Health Foundation. David helped cover our attorney's fees. Those were a few $1,000s. That's definitely an area of technical need in the community. Local First Arizona, we have representation on our board of Local First Arizona. They've been very supportive along the way. Gabe Gardner with food, health, and safety regulations, making sure we're in compliance with that. So a little bit about our cooperative. So we're a hybrid cooperative. So what that means is that individuals, community members, organizations, our workers can all be members of the cooperative. And so that means they can buy a membership, an individual can pay a set amount to become a member, an organization can become a member. It doesn't dilute our voting process, our one person, one vote, or if it's an organization, they'll have a designee. And so that's kind of the structure, and I can get more into that. It's for sure complicated, and our bylaws, like Huda mentioned, are longer, but we think it's worth it because we are a product of the ecosystem, and so we want every part of the ecosystem to be able to be involved in the cooperative. I think, yeah, just an overview to get started. So
That's great. That was great. And oh my gosh, that was 6 months ago, huh? We started our first one of these workshops. So good to have you both back. Thank you for that background, and thank you both for being two of the first to move this work forward. Our next question is, what, in your opinion, makes this model unique? What is interesting about the cooperative model, and what should we all know about it so that we can move forward?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that this is actually a very old way of communal survival, really. The cooperative model is nothing new. It's new when it comes to people, and I could say colonial mindsets have a harder time breaking this down, right? And so for us, I was part of the establishment of the co-op 20 years ago, but we never formally incorporated because there was nothing in the system, within the system to allow that, And so now it's really just including, we're starting with 5, we're hoping to include others in the near future, to be able to say, work as a true co-op and including community members as much as possible, especially those in South Phoenix, throughout the rest of the state who are willing to contribute what we like to say, equity, or oh my gosh, losing the term here. the sweat equity, the sweat equity to be able to produce something and be helpful with it, to help form this cooperative. So we really want to show that, whatever you put in is what you receive. What we put in as far as energy, as far as labor, love, compassion, all of that's being then reciprocated in some one way or form.
yeah, I was going to flag. We have David Martinez stuck outside. Why is this business model unique? I think, especially to those who this is their first introduction, I think the immediate question is, why would you go through all this trouble? Why would you do this? We had to fax in our incorporation. You can incorporate an LLC in 5 minutes on the Corp website. It's great. It's really hard as a co-op. I think as I think about this, a couple of key business decisions that come with being a cooperative, where there are really big differences. One I would say is site selection and the feasibility study. So think about a grocery store business, and I'm not speaking for all grocery stores, but generally how this works is they look at household income. That's how they choose where to site. We just opened up a Sprouts. I don't work for Sprouts. Sprouts just opened up a store in Levine because you have more households and higher household income out there. So you can see how food apartheid develops and how it perpetuates as a downstream effect of redlining. That's the food system we have. Half of Phoenix residents live in the food desert. And so with the community ownership model, you have communities who are thinking about where is food needed? What is the food that we can provide for our people? And so when we make decisions as a board, that's how we're thinking. We're not thinking about the profit model, the shareholders. That's not what we're doing. And then I want to talk, Ronnie, you brought up a really good point about the solution. That's the other thing that I think is really important, because you hear about, for example, Bashes sold to an out-of-state corporation. There are leveraged buyouts. There are these different decisions businesses make to dissolve or change their business model. That's almost impossible with a cooperative. There are some co-ops that go the extra mile and say, if we were to unanimously decide to dissolve, we're donating the proceeds to a nonprofit. It's very hard to imagine a situation where a cooperative with our governance would dissolve, because the community will always need food. And so our hope is that, every neighbor can use these documents and create their cooperative to source locally and feed their families.
Just amazing answers. Thank you both so much. And Maria, you were absolutely right. This is not new work by any means. We finally have this statute and legislation that allows us to formalize that this is ancient work. And as we've moved, I won't say forward as a society, but as we've progressed in time, economies have been colonized, and this very extractive economy, which now is present, right, this profit maximizing, resource depleting, people depleting economy exists now, and this is a way to relearn what did work and to return to what worked, and to honor, all the folks who came before us. So thank you so much for making that point. And Ian, you are, I love your answer as well, this kind of grassroots movement, right? We are the people who are wanting the change, and we're seeing that our institutions and these big businesses are not making these changes. They are not caring for our communities. They're not providing the right resources. And so what are we going to do? We're going to make those, put those decisions in the hands of the people, right? And together, I might not be able to start my own grocery store alone, but if 100 of us come together and invest a little bit of money, we can make it happen, right? It's a lot easier if all of us have this common goal and can invest together in this common future. And it's our responsibility to take charge of our well-being when others won't, or when others are trying to minimize it. So thank you both so much for those answers. That was my soapbox. Okay, this question is about lessons learned. What advice would you give cooperative entrepreneurs who are working to incorporate their cooperative formally? Is there anything you kind of wished you knew about the incorporation process before it started?
Well, I have previous to incorporation of Food Forest, I had actually, as an entrepreneur, had the experience of incorporating LLCs, multiple, nonprofits as well, things like that. For me, it was more of I knew there was an issue with the state as far as incorporating and recognizing that. I wish it was easily done through the e-court, just as a tool, because so many people would have such more access to them throughout the state. And, they don't have an office down the street, unfortunately, that they can just walk into. So I think that would be a huge game changer for cooperatives in the state if they were to, try to find a way, a solution for that obstacle. But for us, it was more on the human aspect of it, of the people side, relationship building. For our 5 that incorporated the Food Forest, we were kind of, I like to make this comment the other day, it's like we were kind of just put in the same sandbox and told to play together, and so it was relationship building, how can we trust one another as partners, as business owners, as community members. And so it really was, for us, we probably worked together the first year just in building relationship and developing plans on how we wanted to formulate the Food Forest Club. And then now we're incorporated, it took a lot of numerous meetings, efforts on all aspects, preparing, even water infrastructure. It took months. It took almost a solid year to put water infrastructure to our acre, on the property. So being in the dirt helped also build those bonds of how we work together. And so I feel like that was one of the big resources for us of having that time, and so my little soapbox as well, letting people, finding who you want to bring onto the team. It really is the labor of love, the labor of effort, the labor of relationship building. And I want to say that has been the biggest lessons learned of really harnessing those relationships so that you could move forward together in a good way.
Yeah, I echo everything Maria said. I think one benefit that we did a few things right. One, we slowed down the process. We had preconceptions about what kind of cooperative we wanted to be, but what we did instead is we spent the summer of 2021 doing listening sessions where people could get involved. We had free facilitation from Pinnacle Prevention and Adrian Darbe. That was really critical for distilling what we wanted. We went through all of these key junctures. What did the members want? We voted on it. And then at the end, we actually, we had built a pretty large mailing list. And so we treated them as our members. We not incorporated, no one, put down the membership share, but we sent out the bylaws to that membership and we sent out a ballot of people who wanted to be on the board. And so instead of just sending our bylaws saying a list of board members, we had them vote on it. And so that was, I think, a really powerful way of getting people to contribute and to buy in. And I think we have a great board, I think, because of that. and we have really strong bylaws because of that as well. And so I think that's one thing we learned. There's so many other things that we've learned. I think one key hurdle that we took like 2 years to get over was the distinction between a for-profit, a nonprofit, and then a cooperative. Because there are no cooperatives in Arizona, and because most of the people doing this work in nonprofits, they want you to be a nonprofit. Co-ops are not nonprofits. You will make a profit, but it's for your members. A for-profit serves the shareholders. That's a different beast. So I just, it tripped us up so much. It's just because we didn't know an alternative, and now, with Hannah's help and with, people do this journey with us, we now have a clear kind of lines of what we are and what these other corporate entities can be. And I think one quick point on the ACC website, yes, E-Corp, if we could make it so that you add another button, I realize it's really, I used to work in government, I realize changing government websites is very hard. But if you could add a button to treat co-ops like LLCs, because they both have members, and you could just add it to the website, so you don't have to go in person, you don't have to relearn how to use a fax machine, that would be excellent. So friendly amendment.
Thank you both so much for those answers. I really liked those answers. Maria, I really liked your answer of communication was, we didn't even mention that, right? We only talked about the formal procedures this whole time, but that is a hugely important part of a cooperative business. They only work if the members work well together, right? They do not work well if there's kind of difference of opinions or difference of values. So it's really, really right. You're right. Step one is finding the right people to be in this partnership. Especially if right now, there's a lot of barriers. People who can pass the stress test with you. I think that's a really great point. And Ian, you said a similar thing, engaging with the community, and you have, these are two different, scaled co-ops. Phoenix Food Coop is a lot bigger because it's multi-stakeholder and can include consumer owners, but really from the get-go, engaging community members and showing them we're starting with your vote. Instead of, we're making this decision, then you can participate later. It's no, this is how we're making this decision. We start and set that example and that precedence really early on. I also heard that there was some really great community organizations and support that you were able to find, which is really important. I would, since we're in this space in Arizona together where there's not a lot of these, if you wouldn't mind, Ian, kind of repeating a few of those organizations that you found were really supportive of the cooperative, of your incorporation and your movement, that would be really helpful again.
Yeah, I was thinking on the way over here how to summarize kind of what help we need and what help we got. Kind of borrowing from the Arizona 5 C's, I think there's the 3 C's. I think there's the coaching, the capital, and the collaboration. And so in terms of coaching, there's Local First Arizona. They are set up really well for businesses. We're learning from each other around cooperatives. And so that TA is really helpful. And then on top of that, I think there's getting grants, and then there's administering grants. The new federal grants have a lot of really special rules, and so figuring that out, I think is a new challenge. And so we have Biosol Foundation, we have other folks who are expert in grants. On the capital side, I wanted to talk, you see in these slides a lot of talk about equity, which currently doesn't really reach Arizona communities. It doesn't really reach in equity in terms of dollars. Flexible capital in these businesses, usually like friends and family money, but to systematically invest that. So that's a conversation that's happening with philanthropies about how to contribute, how to invest the equity that they can invest in stocks on Wall Street, in local community assets. So that's a really key discussion. And then also, Biosol was able to cover our legal fees, help pay for Dave Swanson, who's a great asset for us as a cooperative guru in Minneapolis to bring some of this knowledge to Arizona. And then collaboration, I think, and every step of the way we've been talking to Thrive as well. I want to clarify, like every part of this has been really helpful to get help. Collaboration, I think one thing I've noticed too is the most helpful folks, just they may not know the answer, but they make warm introductions. And so that kind of connecting email is really, really valuable. And I think that's also comes with admitting you don't know the answers, because we had to course correct a few times. And so we're learning together. These events are critical. Hopefully our goal is to make all of our documents open source. And so we can templatize these, we can make it so easier so that we've been organizing for 3 years and it's all been volunteer work. We actually just hired our first employee, Audrey Thompson, who is joining me today here as our general manager. So we have our first worker owner. She's also automatically a member of the board. But everything we've had to do kind of on our own. I wrote the HR manual 2 weeks ago. So there's just, I think, really listening to what folks need. I get a lot of help, I think once or every couple of weeks of, hey, can we help you open the store? It's like, we have 1,000,001 things to do between now and then. We'll talk to you in 2 years. Like, I think that listening part is really important too.
You know, for the Food Forest Cooperative, we're very fortunate that we did have initial seed funding through a private donor that came through Arizona State University. And so we're very fortunate to be able to have funds to be able to access that. So, and then also we had a program that my husband was a part of as well. And two of our 5 members actually participated in that. So that was something actually very, shout out to Hannah and the team. It was good. That really helped. I mean, for us, our incorporation process, we could not have done it without them. So very extremely appreciative for them and their energy and just the labor of love for this when it comes to cooperative models. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of peopling. It's a lot of managing, and we appreciate that, you know, and being the 2 in the state here, you know, I'm sure everyone has their own growing pains with this, you know, but then actually why, and I guess kind of tying in one of the questions is, we do this because we care. We do this because we believe in our humanity. We believe in community. We believe that we can be better. You know, we could do better. And so I feel like even we do this with 100 different challenges, but we still push through every day. Sometimes questioning it, you know, many times. But we believe in it, and everyone needs, and we're being focused. All of us need to survive. We need to thrive. We want to be able to have access to healthy food, nutrient-dense foods, and be better.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you both so much. And I will also say that both of these organizations are, like, it's an incredible resource that they have posted their articles and bylaws. The Phoenix Food Co-op, these 2 are tongue twisters when they're back to back. The Phoenix Food Co-op really blazed the trail and did the really hard work of how do we write these bylaws. I mean, these legal documents, as I'm sure all of you thought that conversation was super, super engaging and exciting, right? Imagine writing that like 28-page legal document. It's a lot of work. It takes a lot of understanding, and it's really hard to do without examples. So the examples that they're both providing as free resources to others are so important. And we've learned so much, I've spent so much working with them and creating these documents that this is a different business model. It's not the traditional, there's not a lot of templates, especially that matches and the statutes. So just big gratitude for the resource that both of these organizations are providing for cooperatives moving forward. So thank you. Okay, I'm going to start opening it up to audience questions for about 10 minutes if we have any. Online, if you have any questions for Ian or Maria, both, or in person. Okay, we have one question online.
So we have a comment in the chat from Vijiva. I saw a mention of their models. Is there a link available to see their structure? So there was a bit of trouble hearing the audio. You all are doing an amazing job. This is awesome.
So do you have any descriptors? So it's the worker cooperative for the Food Forest and the hybrid model for the Phoenix Food Co-op. And I know both kind of websites are in development of building out the cooperative resources. Is there anything you guys want to say about that?
I'll just mention, because we kind of started from scratch, there were mostly out-of-state models that we followed. And so specifically the Food Cooperative Initiative, all of their resources are excellent. They have a startup guide that is our Bible. That's been great. The University of Wisconsin has a cooperative center that has a few white papers that are helpful. Again, like we started with 28-page documents. I'm giving you 50-page documents, but everything in there is just gold. And then I think reading through the way we wrote up our bylaws, as we read a collection of cooperative bylaws from across the country, and we took the best of what we thought was from other cooperatives. And those co-ops are, because there's actually only a few multi-stakeholder cooperatives in the country. And so those were Dorchester Co-op, which is actually just starting up. They just started their capital campaign and membership drive. So very awesome website. Recommend Dorchester Co-op in Western Massachusetts. Seattle Central Co-op is also multi-stakeholder. And then I don't think they're multi-stakeholder, but they're really great kind of like cousin co-ops in Dayton, Ohio. It's called Gem City Market. They're another component of this that they have is they have, when you start selling your shares, you have to do what's called an offering memorandum. And so that details all of your finances, and you tell people who are buying these memberships, hey, like what is your business, who is funding you? It's all very transparent. It's all very instructive if you're trying to start a co-op. And I'm happy to share links to all of those.
Yeah, I think for us as a member owner, we're actually in the initial phases of just starting to develop and expanding our membership, as well as in the coming months or weeks, I should say, of recruiting our board. So we're barely in that phase of like trying to figure out locally, how do we want to function? How does the board function? How do we want to have these relationships, these working relationships with all the different stakeholders in the community? And so yeah, we're in that initial baby phase of the cooperative.
So stay tuned. Okay, any other questions? Yeah, I'm gonna make you give a
I guess my question is, what are the challenges and opportunities in terms of financing new cooperatives in Arizona and nationally?
Good question.
So my day job is in alternative finance for small business. So I think about this a lot. I think I'd say two tools. One is, like I mentioned earlier, investing equity in these types of businesses. If you're an individual, if you're a credit union, if you're whatever financial institution that has excess, not excess, but money to invest, getting that into an investable vehicle for small businesses like Maria's or the Phoenix Food Coop, I think is really important. It's actually, my homework this weekend is to write up what's called a simple agreement for future equity. And so what that does is we don't have to go through the whole registration process with the state, and it's a way of at a discount saying to you, Jason, that we aren't yet able to offer equity, but once we do, whatever you put in will be valued more. And so we can give you a 20% discount. So if you put in $800, when we are able to offer equity as new memberships, it'll be worth $1,000. And that doesn't confer voting rights. It doesn't dilute any of the co-op democracy, but allows us to get over that gap of we have about $20,000 in legal fees to register to sell these securities and memberships later on. So that instrument I think is really important of getting equity pre-membership drive into these businesses. There are a lot of debt instruments out there. We don't need more debt instruments. We can go along from that. There are challenges there, but equity first is really what we're looking at. The second thing I think I would say is a mindset shift in terms of where we're investing our money. And so there's financial institutions, ASU has a foundation that have money that they invest in equities all over the country. And if we could just take 1% of that and ask them, hey, invest this here in Phoenix, that would unlock so much capital for folks like us. And we can give you, we're diligently working to give you the business details of what our plans are and how we want to reach profitability. But that kind of patient capital from institutions that can invest locally is really critical.
Share a little bit of our the angle, I guess, to see that the way we're approaching it is also working with local community groups, local organizations to actually share our product with, from that place of selling the retail aspect of it. And that's really how we're starting to generate our revenues moving forward, is really starting to package what we're growing. We're starting to harvest items, starting to have items to put out there, working with groups in South Phoenix specifically, but with hopes to eventually have them available in the marketplace.
Yeah, and I'll just add that we did do a workshop in April around financing cooperatives. We partnered with Shared Capital, which is a cooperative lending specific financial institution. They are located in Minnesota, I believe, one of the M states in the state Minnesota. And they are super, super helpful. They serve nationally. They're a smaller bank, right? But they are a wealth of knowledge around how to properly and in alignment with the cooperative principles and structure, how to finance or loan funds, whether it be startup or operational or whatnot, to cooperative businesses. We have been trying to get financial institutions locally on board to understand this model, to understand their unique financing opportunities or requirements, right? We have not seen many financial institutions on board, but if you know anybody who works in a financial institution, we are so happy to connect them to Shared Capital, to this video resource, to just to jump into conversation, because there does seem to be a large barrier. We're hoping that as we see more cooperatives pop up, right, they'll kind of match the need, meet the need. But we found that a lot of our ecosystem support agencies are much more reactive than proactive. So
Can I give a shout out?
Yeah, shout out.
So we bank at Marisol Credit Union. They've been excellent. Credit unions are cooperatives because they pay a membership when you join a cooperative. They've been great. They've said, when you're ready, we're ready to invest. And so that's something that when we're ready, we want to get there. We want the business model like Maria's built it. Get that right, and then something people can invest in. So credit unions, I think there's an opportunity there.
Awesome. Okay, and yes, Ian and I have been talking about financing and financial models, and maybe not with the expertise we need, but we talk about it pretty often. So feel free to engage in conversation with us later. We have a lot of creative ideas. Yes.
More of a suggestion on that topic of financing.
Sorry, I'm gonna make you speak so that people online can hear.
More of a suggestion on the topic of financing. So, I'm doing a PhD at ISU downtown campus, focused on social entrepreneurship and social enterprises. And in the conferences, there's a big move, essentially in multiple high-level organizations thinking about how they can redirect their resources to more sustainable practices. I think that this is like a marriage ready to happen, right? Where, especially here in Arizona, we got this, unique type of innovation happening. But there's those funders looking, how do we redirect our resources from less sustainable practices to this? And so I think, hopefully trying to engage even in those molds of, the heading social entrepreneurship, social enterprises. There's a lot of that topic and discussion where actually there are even major venture capitalists and so on trying to redirect resources. So I just don't have the connections. I'm not yet a millionaire, but once I am, I can help us.
Okay, so if anybody knows anything at ASU Enterprise, please make the connection. Yeah, there is a big consumer and investor movement towards wanting to invest in sustainability and wanting to prioritize that. The shift has not been, or the want has not manifested into as much action yet, but there is definitely reports saying that this is increasingly important. And so we have the solution if somebody has the contact, right? So thank you very much for that. Okay, any other questions or comments? Yeah.
Just on a more positive note, how do you all take the time to celebrate the small successes and joys that happen in this long, arduous process of incorporating, forming, building, strengthening, all the verbings? How do you celebrate your joys?
That's a really good question. Invite them to join in. I think, you know, we all showed up to incorporate. That was the, we were standing outside the office and we're like, and Brian's like, that's it. We just have to turn in the papers. You know? But we celebrated it as a team, you know, as we were all showed up. Some of us met up for food after, you know, but a lot of it was just talking through the process and giving ourselves the space, really, the space to be able to have this conversation of how do we feel, what do we think, it doesn't always have to be business, you know, and so I feel like sometimes we get caught up in these cycles that it's always business because that's what we live off of, right? But then also part of that is the human aspect again of, you know, we're only as strong as all of our team. And so it's also ensuring that we do get to celebrate, we get to the shout outs on through text, through group meeting, through email, through, you know, even through our social media, you know, always highlighting our team, always giving the shout outs when things are happening, when there's a harvest, you know, for us, that's celebration because that's 100% of our investment is in the ground. You know, and so when we harvest something, it's a community effort, really. We bring the kids out, we bring folks to help us out, and then when it comes to, you know, we celebrate our new logo, we celebrated that. You know, we're like, oh yeah, we have a good logo, and we have a product that we shared at the Food Expo a few weeks ago, and we're like, we have our first product, you know, and so it might be small, but for us, it's huge. You know, it's the steps that we want to achieve in a larger picture, you know, so we try, we're human, but we try to acknowledge all the different levels we're at.
Yeah, our first test order in August of 2020, I remember it was delivered to my front yard. Yeah, and that was, and mind you, like, so much of our work happened during the pandemic. I'm not sure we would be where we are if we weren't stuck at home, because we just had time to meet on. We figured out Zoom. We started this December 2019, and then a lot of it went online. And so when we would meet in person, we're also meeting people for the first time. And I remember one of them was saying, you know, you're not as tall as I thought you were, and things like that were just fun. A couple things that we started that I think have really taken off. Every meeting we do a check-in and check-out, and we sort of icebreaker, and you get to know something about the people in the group. It's just random things, and it's good to see everyone. I think people are genuinely excited to come to our meetings. The other thing we've done is, since we're coming out of the pandemic, we kind of have to adjust and okay, we can actually do this meeting in person. The weeks that we don't have our board meetings, we had a standing calendar event to come to a co-working space or release space and gather and do working sessions. So like some work that's done, mostly conversation, but it's 2 hours when anyone who's on our mailing list can come by. We talk through things, we figure out the thorny document things. We also, there's a free beer and wine tap that some folks partake in. But that's really helped. I think that's kind of turning point, like, oh, not the tap, but the meetings. So yeah, I think that creating that space, and I'm really excited till we can actually have a full space for more people to gather on a regular basis.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful question, Jacinda. What amazing answers. And I think we're gonna, unless there's any pressing questions, I would like to leave that on a high note. That's a nice answer. Okay, so we do ask that you stay around just a little longer online and in person because we do have a quick survey at the end here. But just to review our workshop objectives. So we covered a little bit about the basics of the cooperative business model. If you still have any questions pertaining to cooperative structure or model, please reach out to us. We can talk, obviously, we could talk 2 hours about incorporation. We can talk a lot longer about just cooperatives in general. So please let us know if there's any questions in the future. We got to hear from the ACC. Thank you so much, Joey and Tanya, again, for joining us just about the state's requirements and providing a contact point directly to the office, directly to somebody who is excited and willing to help. Huda took us through the key features and key decision points of the articles of incorporation, which are the document required to turn to the state for cooperatives, and then the bylaws, the kind of legal operating document of cooperatives. And then we met and got to hear great stories and advice from two cooperative business owners, Ian and Maria. Thank you so much. Looking forward, just some future engagement opportunities. We will be launching our cooperative food business training program again in spring. We will have an English and a Spanish cohort in the spring. Our Dr. Novell, Jessica is here, and she'll be one of the instructors for the Spanish speaking cohort. So again, sometimes referrals the best. If you know anybody's interested in this kind of stuff, it's a free program. So please connect us. If you need any support, we are always happy to work with folks. We have a sliding scale, and we are really just committed at the end of the day to working with folks who are interested in activating this model and moving forward. And then we have our last ecosystem development workshop of the year coming up in 2 weeks, and I will pass it to Cassandra, who is the co-lead of that workshop.
Yeah, so I was going to mention the next workshop, which is on September 28th, is going to focus on community wealth building. I mean, just a little definition here because it's a term people aren't familiar with, but just based off of today's conversation, it's going to be extremely relevant because almost every question you all asked today related to community wealth building. So community wealth building is a people-centered approach to local economic development, which redirects wealth back into the local economy and places control and benefits into the hands of local people. So it's really fitting based on today's conversation. It's going to be all about how do we establish these relationships between CDFIs, other financial institutions, local business owners, local anchor institutions. And I think it's going to be really exciting. We have folks from Native Community Capital, which is a Native CDFI. We have folks from Greater Phoenix Leadership. We have local cooperative business owners. We're just really excited. So look forward to seeing you there, and you can register on our website.
That one will be a little more engaging and exciting. This one is really just about statutes, just very important. Regulations are very important, but not the most fun to talk about. But next time should be really great, and that will be in the same room in 2 weeks. Okay, that will be the end of the ecosystem development workshops for this year. But when we do ask you to fill the survey out at the second, we're going to ask what are the topics, what are the elements of the cooperative ecosystem that are still kind of lacking? Is it events for cooperative owners? Is it, I can't think of anything right now, it's still in the workshop. What is it? You tell me, that's the whole point, right? We don't know what you all want. Okay, so here's some previous, again, we'll share all of this. I'm also working on creating this resource page on the website, but here's where Ian and Maria were 6 months ago. This is our financing. These are free resources for everyone to use. We have PDFs available as well. And then a special thank you to a lot of folks, to Matt Mercer, who's sitting right here, who helped us reach out to the ACC and get a lot of really great contacts and help us really define this workshop and what needs to happen. So thank you so much, Maddie. To Ian and Maria for being to keep coming back with these panels. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your insight. Joey and Tanya, the Dr. Novell team is going to work in translating this into Spanish for our Spanish speaking community, and to Green and New American for catering this, and also to the City of Phoenix for being our program partners through all of the work that we do right now.